Okay, this is section 3.12. Well, you can't see that. 3.12. And this is part 1. And there will be 4 parts to this. I recommend that you watch a part and then work the questions that pertain to that part. So for this one, I think it's a little bit easier to learn if we go in a different order than what the questions are on the assignment. So I'm going to start off with question 7. Okay. Now all 7 does is it helps you to distinguish between what we would call a quadratic equation versus a linear equation. Oops. So quadratic versus linear. And the difference between the two is, for a quadratic, that term implies that the highest power of the variable, in most cases we'd be using an x, is 2. In other words, you have like an x squared in there, nothing higher than that, okay? Or it could have been, an a squared or a z squared. Whatever the variable is, the highest power is a 2, and that would make it a quadratic equation. Now, if it's linear, then the highest power on the variable is 1, and that's like what we've been doing, like y equals mx plus b. The x is to the 1 power, and that's a line, which is why it's called linear, okay? So that's a pretty easy question until you get down to D. D, they're trying to trick you because they have a number that's squared, like my D says 8 squared x plus 6 equals 0. And remember, just because the 8 is squared does not make it a quadratic, because it has to be the highest power of the variable. My variable is x and its power is 1. So therefore, in this case, this would still be linear. And that's the only part where they're trying to be a little tricky. Okay, so let's talk for a second about, hold on one sec. Okay, let's talk for a second about what we're really trying to do here in this section. And let me back you up to something that you've done in a previous section that's basically a double distribution, or like a FOIL method. So let's say I have something like x plus 2 times x plus 3, and I ask you to FOIL those. So what that means is every term in this parentheses is going to be distributed to every term in that parentheses. So the x times x would be our first 2 terms. I would get x squared. Then the x times 3 would be a positive 3x. And then the 2 times x would be a positive 2x. And then the 2 times 3 would be a plus 6. Now, once we have all of that multiplied, we can look at it and realize that those two are like terms. So we can simplify this a little. 3x plus 2x equals 5x. And so this would be our final answer if we were asked to multiply these two binomials. The answer is a trinomial because it has 3 terms. And what we're trying to learn in section 312 is how to take a trinomial and factor it back into the original 2 binomials. So in problem, let's go to problem number 1. What they do is they start off basically spoon feeding you a little bit. And so what I may have for something like this is, and I'll show you what this process is as we get further into this section, but if I'm going to factor a trinomial, I'm going to end up with 2 binomials. So I can anticipate having these 2 sets of parentheses like I did up here when I started. The x squared is usually pretty simple because we know that's going to start off with an x times x. So that part's pretty easy to fill out. In this case, these are both plus signs, and I'll get to that a little bit later when we're learning how to factor without this spoon-fed part. But what's happening is if I, let's say, put one number in here, then could you tell me what this other number is? And if you go back to this original question up here when we were multiplying, notice that it was the 2 times the 3 that made the 6. So if I want to figure out what this number is, then I have to ask myself, 2 times what number would bring me to that 6? And the answer is 3. So in question 1, they have already factored one factor out. So let me show you what my question 1 looks like. I've got x squared plus 4x plus 3, and they want me to factor it, but they've already done some of the factoring for me. So they've got my 2 sets of parentheses, they've already filled in x plus 3, and I only have to fill in the second set of parentheses. Well, the first part's easy because this is an x, this has to be an x because x times x is x squared. The second part, I can sort of do a backwards question here. So 3 times what will give me that original 3? It would have to be a positive 1. And so that's what my answer would be. And that's all we're doing on question 1 is filling in that second set of parentheses. Question number 2 is the same way. And so I think you should be able to get those ones pretty easily. And let me look. I think I wanted to try question 4 on this one. But yes, I did. So question 4 is a multiple choice question. And so it gives you the original trinomial. So in my case, I have 4y squared plus 29y. So this is question number 4, minus 24. And they give you 4 choices for multiple choice. And each one is a potential answer, and you have to decide which is the right answer. So we've got that one, and then we've got 2y plus 8, 2y minus 3, and then we have 4y minus 3, y plus 8, and then the last one is 2y minus 3 and 2y plus 8. So there's only one right answer, and it would be whichever one, if you were to FOIL it, would result in this original trinomial. Okay. Now, you have not been taught how to factor this type of trinomial, and you will not be taught that in this course. So this becomes a question of literally doing the FOIL method on each of these guys to see which answer will give you that one. Now it turns out that C is the correct answer, and I'll show you why. 4y times y is 4y squared, so I'm doing the FOIL method. 4y times 8 is plus 32y. Negative 3y times y is minus 3y. And negative 3 times 8 is plus 24. And if I combine these two like terms, I will get 4y squared plus 29y plus 24. I'm sorry, minus, that was a minus. Let me fix that. That was a minus and a minus. And this is the same answer as the trinomial that they started with. What you'll notice if you go through and factor these guys is that the difference between the answer you get for A versus B versus C versus D is all about these two middle terms. The first term and last term will be the same for each of those when you're doing the FOIL method. It's these two middle terms that dictate which one ends up being correct. So for some of you that might be a shortcut, because you could actually, you know, where do the two middle terms come from? They come from in the FOIL method, they come from the O and the I, the outer and the inner. So you could just reduce your problem to doing the outer and the inner, combining those like terms and see which one gives you the positive 29y. And that's a little shorter way of answering that question. Okay, so this concludes part 1. So part 1 ended up going over questions 7, 1, 2, and then number 4. And I went in that order because I felt like it made better sense. And so we'll pick up with the next questions on the next video.